Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Planning in Plain Sight, the official YouTube channel of the Cumberland County Planning Department, where our goal is to make community planning clear, accessible, and engaging for everyone, because the future works better when we can all see it. I'm Kirk Stoner. I'm the Director of Planning for Cumberland County. On today's episode, we're focused on transportation. We're calling it the Transportation Planning Primer. So transportation is really a critical issue facing our county and really our region that is not new. Practically any public meeting you go to these days, you're going to hear something about transportation. The roads are too congested. There's safety issues. We have new residents coming in that need access to public transit. These are common issues that really aren't new to our county or the region. If we look back historically, Native Americans and Indian trails that progressed through Cumberland County, footpaths that were trade corridors, really mimic what we're seeing today with I-81 and the Pennsylvania Turnpike. So what has historically been a transportation hub of Cumberland County continues to be so today. One of the elements of our comprehensive plan and one of the goals is we call the Cumberland Principles for the Cumberland County Comprehensive Plan is to expand transportation choices. So as we talk about transportation in today's episode, we're really talking about all modes of transportation. We're talking about highways. We're talking about airports, railroads, public transit, bicycling, and probably most importantly, pedestrian amenities, because as we progress through the transportation system, at one point or another, we're all pedestrians. So on today's episode, we have with us Andrew Baumberger, who's the Executive Director of the Harrisburg Area Transportation Study and the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission. So I remember way back in the infancy of my career, I was working as a young, fresh college graduate and was directed to do a meeting with some staff at HATS. At the time, I had no idea who HATS was or what they did, but I quickly learned, and I learned they had a very important role in transportation planning. So today we'll learn about HATS, we'll talk about PennDOT, our transportation system, and the processes that are followed as we're trying to truly expand and improve transportation in the county. So we'll start off, Andrew, if you want to give a quick introduction to yourself and tell us more about what HATS does.
Hi, so thanks, Kirk, and yeah, I'm Andrew Baumberger. I'm the Executive Director here at Tri-County Regional Planning Commission. We serve a variety of roles in the region. One of those is the planning staff for the Harrisburg Area Transportation Study, or HATS. And, Kirk, I know you know this. This is kind of a warning to the viewers. We're going to use a lot of acronyms. We'll try to refer to them as their actual name first, or at least on the first mention, but we will kind of go through and be using, sometimes planners seem that we have our own language, I think. So what is HATS? So HATS is what's called a Metropolitan Planning Organization, or as an acronym, an MPO. So HATS is the MPO for Dauphin, Cumberland, and Perry counties. MPOs are organizations that plan and program federal transportation funds. MPOs cover areas that are larger than 200,000 residents. Some MPOs are single county. So York, Lancaster, Lebanon, in our area are all single county MPOs. So they have similar offices to ours. But because of our region's kind of unique geography and development patterns, our MPO covers multiple counties, which makes us a little unique. There's a handful of us in the state that have MPOs that cover multiple counties. While, again, Tri-County Regional Planning Commission serves as the admin and planning staff, HATS itself is actually made up of two different committees, a coordinating committee and a technical committee. Each of those two committees is itself made up of members from each of our three counties, Harrisburg City, PennDOT, and what used to be Capital Area Transit is now Rapid Transit, or SRTA. As an MPO, we work with a variety of partners in the region, PennDOT, municipalities, counties, special interests and advocacy groups, state and local officials, and we kind of produce and implement a variety of planning documents and programs for the region.
So Andrew, when you're talking about HATS, you're mentioning the committee. So for instance, I sit on the technical committee. So when I come to those meetings, I see a variety of partners around the table. So when we're talking about transportation planning and seeing these federal and state funds come to local projects, this isn't a responsibility that is solely executed by PennDOT. So how do you work with PennDOT? What's that relationship look like? Because I think a lot of our residents look and see, PennDOT's in charge of all the roads and they're making all these decisions independently, but I don't believe that's the case, is it?
No, and I mean, we kind of our organization exists to kind of bring in other voices, other perspectives into that transportation planning process and documents and programs and all that stuff. So, I mean, we really work hand in hand with PennDOT on basically every transportation planning thing we do that isn't like kind of the hyper local level. Primarily, though, our work with PennDOT really focuses on one of the two most important things we do, called the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, the TIP. That's a 4-year federal and state funded construction schedule. So any project that uses federal funds, most projects that use state funds, that happen within Dauphin, Cumberland, or Perry counties have to be listed on this document called the TIP. The TIP is updated every 2 years. We're finishing up an update cycle right now. We just submitted it to PennDOT on Wednesday. We work with PennDOT very closely on the development of the TIP. We have over 100 projects on our TIP. So we're constantly working with both PennDOT, municipalities, other stakeholders. Things happen in a project. Some of these projects are huge multi-million-dollar projects. Some of them are fairly small. They're all pretty expensive, but some of them are much smaller. But things happen. When you're dealing with 100 different projects, you're constantly having to kind of massage and we call cash flowing and moving things around to make sure money and construction schedules are moving as efficiently as possible, and effectively as possible through the system to make sure we're delivering these projects as best we can.
Andrew, what's the total value of the current TIP? Those 100 projects, how much does that cost us?
So those 100 projects, and keep in mind that not all of those projects will be done on any, projects span multiple years and typically multiple TIPs. We get in our region approximately $100 million a year collectively. Now those are kind of split into multiple 8 or 9 different what we call funding pots or funding flavors. Each has their own kind of specific eligibility with types of projects they can fund, but all together, we get about $100 million a year. So in any given TIP, we have about $400 million we're working with.
So if we have $100 million per year, 400 million over 4 years, it may sound a lot on face value, but when you really start to dig into it, how much stuff costs, that money doesn't go very far. So what
Sure.
processes do you use to kind of prioritize all the needs that are out there? Because I think, our residents were out driving around or out walking around. The needs are very apparent. You can see them everywhere you go. So how do we identify those needs and then prioritize them to make sure that we're spending the money in the right way?
Sure. And so I'll go back a little bit. I mentioned the TIP. The other really important document, they're all important. The other kind of key document and program or plan that we develop and implement is what we call our regional transportation plan. It's also called more generally a long range transportation plan. I'll refer to it as the RTP, Regional Transportation Plan. That's a 25-year plan document that looks at the current status of transportation projects and programs, and then identifies long-term needs and recommends projects to meet those. Within that RTP, we have what we call our project pipeline. That takes we have our RTP looks at every aspect of the transportation system. So it looks at safety, it looks at kind of the conditions of the assets, so road and bridge condition, it looks at freight considerations, congestion, active transportation, it has land use stuff. So it has all these different things we take all of that and kind of layer it on top of each other, work with our committee to develop a scoring system that kind of shows the priorities of the region, and then we score transportation needs or potential projects, and then it kind of comes out in that objective scoring based system. It's a complicated system that we try to make easy to understand within the plan, but ultimately produces a list of broadly prioritized projects. I'll go back to when we develop a TIP, we're not just dealing with one big $100 million pot of money. We're dealing with 7 or 8, 9 on any given TIP, smaller pots and of varying sizes. You also have all of the other projects that are already programmed. When we start TIP development, the first thing we do is figure out how much money is going to be needed to finish the projects we've already started. Obviously, that's the first priority. Then we look at, okay, what's kind of left over to be used to program new projects. We work with PennDOT to prioritize what we would call asset management projects. So, PennDOT is kind of the keepers of and evaluators of the really heavy technical engineering aspects of, like, what bridges are in what state of repair and need what improvements moving forward. We then come and provide the context of, like, I would say more of the planning level context of, if we do a project here, we'll be able to address a congestion, a safety, and a bike ped issue or so, or, for instance. So we take our project pipeline that gives us a handful of high regional priority projects, and we review that and kind of fill in the available gaps in funding on the TIP. I hope that's a
No, I think
complicated
it is.
answer to a complicated question.
It is. And Andrew, I know, I participate in this process. So I've sat in a number of our prioritization meetings too. And I think that the key takeaway here for our residents is that we have a limited amount of money. We have a very rigorous process to prioritize projects. And then further, we have certain pots of funding that can only apply to certain projects. So it's really a balancing act when you get to a certain point of what our needs are, what's the available funding for those needs, and then what are our highest priorities. So I know I've heard sometimes the folks say, well, this is a political process. They pick the projects that folks want from a political standpoint. And it's really not based upon need or information. I don't believe that could be further from the truth. And we go through this process. It's very rigorous. It involves a lot of different parties. It's a public process too, where we have reviews through our HATS meetings. We also have public engagement opportunities that I know you and your team run. That this is a very, very extensive, very in-depth process that's really spitting out what we believe are the greatest needs in our community and a plan to fund them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll take this opportunity, Kirk, to share my screen. We have all of our entire regional transportation plan. So our RTP is created first and foremost as an online resource. We want to make it as usable, as accessible as possible. So we basically, it's created as a series of websites, essentially. You can go to our project pipeline page, might take a minute. Once it loads, this lays out everything. It connects back to previous chapters. So when we talk about safety, you can go back and see, well, what are we, safety can mean a lot of things. What are we talking about safety? Typically, and specific to safety, we did a regional safety action plan that identified safety related priorities. Those are what are then kind of included in this project pipeline evaluation. So you go through, you can see all the different categories here. These are things that we consider and that essentially layer on top of each other. It eventually comes into this mapping application that, again, we're trying to make this as accessible and as transparent as possible. And that these are the pipeline, this is what's on the pipeline that has been submitted to us through, I know we're going to get to how people can get involved. This is kind of the end result. You can see the different maps along the bottom of the screen there. Those are the ways we evaluate things and kind of how points are scored. This is the final result. So you can see where things are predominantly scoring high priority. Now, it's important to note, this is not the be all end all. This is not a numbered list where we start at the first project and just move down. We tend to focus on the high priority projects, but different things happen, and sometimes we have to go, we have to address a specific need, and that's when we'll kind of go down the list a little further. There might be a specific funding type or size that we need. So we use this as kind of the objective starting point to kind of start the conversations and give us a good basis upon which we make those decisions.
Yeah, Andrew, I think that these are great tools. So when we're talking about transparency for our residents that want to know what's going on, what projects are being considered, checking out the Tri-County's website and the HAT's website, all those resources you just looked at, they're not secret or hidden anywhere. They're right there for our residents to take a look at, understand what's going on. So I'd really give everyone that's watching us to encourage you to take a look at those websites and dig into it so you really feel like you understand what's going on, what are the next priorities for the region. If we do look down the road, though, how can residents get involved in identifying transportation problems that they see and trying to get something done about them?
So I'll answer this two ways. First way is kind of the kind of Pollyanna, the best way to get involved is attending meetings, learning the process, staying involved. The world is run by the people who show up. We and I know you guys, we collectively do a lot of planning efforts. We're constantly looking for input from the public. We have, like I've just showed, we have a lot of great tools that we've developed to get input online with mapping and all of that kind of stuff. Basically, everything we do involves some sort of interactive mapping tool. Public engagement now is really driven by online tools. So we've made a lot of great advances in that. So I'd encourage people to kind of stay involved, even at their local municipal level as well. This isn't all, HATS is not making every decision. We are kind of the conveners of the different stakeholders, but we are by no means the only stakeholder. I mean, as an example, Tri-County and HAT staff doesn't vote on any of this stuff. The votes are made by those member organizations that make up the two HATS committees. So there's lots of opportunity for input. Directly, though, the easiest way people can kind of specifically do a transportation need, and I'll go back to our website here in a second. Now I have to hold on. The best way, we maintain what's called what we call our transportation need form. That's an easy web kind of, there we go. So it's right on the front page of our regional transportation plan. It's up here in the corner, transportation need form. When you click this form pops up. It asks some very basic information, both on who you are. Anybody can submit this, a member of the public, a municipal official, anybody. Who you are, some information on the need itself, making sure we understand the issues, or at least from your perspective, what the issues are. If any work's already been done, funding stuff. This is a very important part of the process. Even when we're talking about federal transportation funds only ever pay for at most 80% of a project. We are always trying to find an additional, the other 20%. Sometimes for some projects, that's going to come from typically the municipality, has to be some kind of non-federal source. Oftentimes it's state funds, sometimes it's municipal funds. So anybody can come through and submit a form like this. This form, once submitted, comes to us. We do kind of an initial internal review. We will then coordinate with PennDOT and the local municipality. As long as kind of all of us agree, it's a, it not necessarily that it's the most important transportation need, but that it is a legitimate transportation need that would be worthy of federal transportation funds. It then goes into that project pipeline process. It gets evaluated, it gets prioritized amongst those other, it's about 75 transportation needs right now. We have a lot of other projects that are on what we call our illustrative list. That's other things that have been identified through a variety of processes. It kind of goes into that whole system, gets prioritized, and then when we update our long range plan, our RTP, that gets included in the financial analysis, and then eventually you're looking at potential tip programming. It moves on and actually receives funding, or we try to address it in some other way. The tip is not the only way transportation projects can be funded. That's another important note. There's a lot of different discretionary grant programs, both at the federal and state level, and different kinds of opportunities to get funds for these types of needs.
I think bottom line on this really for our residents is kind of the old adage, if you see something, say something. So if you see a transportation need, say something. We have the form here on the website to put it in. I would encourage folks to don't be shy, put it in there. You can't assume that someone else may put it in, or a municipal government or a county government is going to identify a need. There may be a legitimate need out there that you're familiar with that you put in that could be, ultimately subjected to some funding. So if you see a need, make sure you make us aware of it through the transportation need form here. So I know, Andrew, go ahead.
I was just saying, just to reiterate, you can see the URL here on at the top. Doesn't roll right off the tongue, but it's tcrpc-pa.org/250rtp-home. You can also just go to our website, and it's under this transportation tab. Scroll down to our Regional Transportation Plan 2050. That'll bring you to this site. And then that form is right here in the top corner. We also periodically, we do a lot of social media outreach. You'll see us tweet or post on Facebook or LinkedIn links to all this kind of stuff periodically. So, we are certainly as a staff available. I'm sure, Kirk, you'd be happy that if somebody's interested, we can certainly get you to the right place to submit a transportation need form.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. We have the need form on there. If residents have questions, feel free. You can talk with me or my staff, Andrew and his staff. We'll get you to the right person to make sure that it gets considered. So I know we've covered a lot. This is a complex system and process. I wanted to kind of give the overview today. But Andrew, I'll just ask you one closing question then. If you had infinite resources, what transportation improvement would you make in the region and why? So I've known Andrew for a while. He knows his stuff when it comes to transportation, knows his stuff like few others. So I'm really anxious to see what he would think of what he would improve.
So there's a lot of answers to this question. There are infinite resources. That's kind of like, as a planner, I don't even know how to truly address that. There's a lot of answers to that question. We've heard from a variety of people, regional rail service, some kind of bus rapid transit system, of course, I-81 expansion. We've got the Cat Bridge project, a full system of kind of connected regional trails that connect not just our communities, but even to some of the larger Pennsylvania trail facilities. All of these things have real community and economic benefits. They all have some real impacts that we would have to deal with as well. And they would all take significant resources to complete. So instead of picking just one of those, I'm going to kind of flip this question a little bit and just say the resource I wish that was infinite was time. So I wish all of us, everyone involved in this process, so Tri-County and HATS, the people on the committees, PennDOT, the feds, certainly the public, municipalities, who are probably our most important partner in this process, project stakeholders, advocates. I wish we all had unlimited time to review, comment, revise every project so that it could be kind of the best it can be, meet all of the the most community needs possible, and kind of just be the best project it could possibly be, making the most efficient use of all of our funds. So that's probably a little more kumbaya than you were hoping for out of me, but that's my answer.
I like it. I think you covered a lot of ground there. The time thing, I can definitely agree with you. It seems like we run out of time, and stuff moves so fast that these improvements need to hit the ground sooner. But also, I liked your.
It's not just the things move fast, but there's lots of kind of chunks of different. There's lots of steps in the process, and ultimately, it can be frustrating. The public gets frustrated. We also get frustrated with that process. But the reality is that is the process. We don't have any control over that. That's the process. We try to deal with it and make and kind of bring projects through that process as best we can. And the time that is involved in that process is a reality, and that's one of the biggest hurdles we face.
I also liked your answer, Andrew, too. You're multimodal there. You were hitting a lot of different projects of rail and bus and highway. And I know you're a huge bike ped advocate too. So I think that multimodal system thinking is something that really we need to carry us on into the future. So I want to thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it. From our standpoint, we appreciate working with you and your team. I think you made a lot of great points of how the system works. Probably one of the most important being that it is a very inclusive process, a detailed process where we really need the help of a lot of different partners. So if you're watching the video today, hit subscribe, keep up to date on what's going on throughout the county and the region. Also, too, if you want to drop in the comments any transportation projects you see or think are needed, we encourage you to do the transportation problem form, but stir up the chat a little bit too. If there's things that you'd like us to respond to or the questions we didn't answer, put those in the chat and we'll make sure we get to those. So again, planning in plain sight. We're all about trying to make community planning easy and understandable for our residents because the future works better when we can all see it. So thank you, everyone. Look forward to future episodes.